thank Brenda and the committee for inviting us to participate in the conference. We're very excited. We've been on the phone or by sending emails to one another, getting ready for our session. As Ryan mentioned, it's how to build community wellness. And we think it has significance for a number of reasons, because I think it's really about helping us create a better understanding of the value of the work that we're in and we're engaged in presently. So we're looking forward to the dialogue. In terms of the process for the session, I'm going to give a few remarks at the beginning, introduce the panel members. They will then be speaking where they have 15 minutes to speak on specific work that they're doing in community wellness. And then we will pose some questions to them, and then we'll be posing questions to you as the audience. So in preparing for this session on community wellness, it's very obvious from sessions like the Recreation Summit in Alberta this year, as well as the literature that's out there, that there's tremendous evidence and there's a bit of an international movement taking place, not just around the social determinants of health, but also around community wellness. The body of work carries a clear message that the social factors have a powerful influence on our health. If we want to improve our health, and not just health care, we have to pay attention to these factors that include housing and include poverty, social supports, as well as recreation. And I believe we're finally starting to see greater recognition of this quality of place concept. And that's an important word for us tonight, because each of our speakers is going to be coming at it from the place of their work and the place that they're engaged in presently, that setting. So much of the impetus of this perspective in recent years is coming from, of all sources, the economic literature, which is pointing increasingly to the quality of life and community wellness as a major driver of economic growth. Research argues that in order to thrive in the knowledge economy, communities must pay special attention to factors that relate to lifestyle, cultural choices, and community wellness. So what is the glue that brings us together? It's social infrastructure that adds so much value to our communities. And this includes places and programs, but think of it this way: the four walls of your residence are comprised of your house and the caring relationships which make it your home. So social infrastructure includes physical spaces like schools, libraries, early childhood centers, parks, playgrounds, and recreation centers, which provide physical places for social purposes. Social infrastructure includes activities that contribute to positive well-being, and we're here today to reinforce that message. Recreational and cultural programs are the main form of social infrastructure, and their impact is profound. Recreation must be acknowledged for what it is, an essential building block of healthy communities. So here tonight we have four amazing speakers, and I'd like to introduce them now. I'm going to use the bios so that I don't miss anything, but I have to find them for just a second. So our first speaker tonight is Marilyn, and what we'll be doing is, maybe what I'll do is actually, instead of introducing all four speakers in their bios, I'll do it as they come up to speak. And Marilyn will be speaking from this podium, and they'll be going back to the side here after they speak, but when we're ready for the questions and the engagement with you as the audience, we'll be putting them, as Mona said earlier, on the hot seat. So I've known Marilyn for many years, and I still to this day think it was Marilyn who I may have had a contact with, or maybe it was one of her staff, but in 1984, I was working for Red Cross on the voting team. I was a chemistry major at Acadia, hadn't figured out or knew about recreation. And I was from Cape Breton, and I was hired to travel the province and teach boating safety. And so here was an 18-year-old from Cape Breton and didn't really know anything beyond Port Hawkesbury and west. And it was close to the end of the summer, and I was supposed to be at a session with a bunch of kids to teach them boating safety. And all I knew was that I was supposed to be with the Y program at Barrington. So around 12:30 that day, the session started at 1, the phone call came into the Red Cross in Halifax, and they said, "We're looking for the boating instructor, where is she?" And I answered the phone, I said, "Oh, it's me, and I'll be down at Barrington Street any minute. Just tell me where to park the boats." And of course, it was supposed to be Barrington, Nova Scotia, which I didn't know there was a Barrington, Nova Scotia. So to this day, I think Marilyn was connected to that, but I'm not sure. But I never forgot where Barrington is. So, Marilyn holds a Bachelor of Science in Physical Education and Recreation and a Bachelor of Education from Acadia University, graduating in 1975. Marilyn started her career in municipal recreation in Beaver Lodge, Alberta. After moving back home to Nova Scotia, she was hired by the municipality of District of Shelburne in 1986 to be their first recreation coordinator. Marilyn has a keen interest in community development through recreation and has worked with community organizations in the municipality for the last 26 years to help them achieve their goals, supporting the volunteer efforts of the residents of the municipality, youth leadership development, ensuring that all kids get to play. And she does have a unique program in the municipality that I know the province has been looking at and celebrating, called Kids Fair Play Fund. And community wellness continues to be 4 of the main goals of the Recreation and Parks Department. Marilyn resides in Lower Ohio, Shelburne County with her husband Doug and has 2 grown children. Her flowers garden, her flower gardens, volunteer work, and the newfound hobby of photography are her personal recreation passions. So welcome, Marilyn, and I'll ask you to come up to give your remarks.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. I didn't know if I needed the mic or not, because sometimes I think my voice is kind of soft, sometimes not. To get back to Dawn, in 1984 I lived in Barrington, but I wasn't actually the recreation director. I think that would have been Francis Scott at that point. Anyway, as Dawn said, we're speaking tonight from our own perspective, our own experience, our own observations. So what I'm presenting here is what I've learned and experienced in the past 26 years in the different communities of the municipality of the District of Shelburne. There are 7 districts, and each of those 7 districts have between 3 and 5 what I would consider to be communities, because sometimes there may be 2 different names of a community that kind of make themselves into one community. So there's more names out there of communities, but as far as geographic groups that call themselves communities, there's probably 3 to 5 in each of those 7 districts. So I've been working with those people for quite some time. So I've taken this as a definition that a healthy community is one that includes elements that enable people to maintain a high quality of life and productivity. People need to be able to feel that they are special in a community and they make contributions. So they need that quality of life and productivity wherever it is they live. So I've taken and broken down what I consider to be some of the main elements, and I'm sure there's lots others. In working with community, there's a need for communication and conversations. In order for the community to know what's going on, you have to have some means to talk with them and they to talk with you. There also needs to be many, many different kinds of conversations with people. And those conversations can happen in the grocery store, they can happen at church, they can happen walking down the street. You need to be approachable. And so as a recreation professional, you need to keep that in mind. And those conversations also happen between the people in the communities themselves, and you want to try to foster and make that happen. Ownership and pride in accomplishments. The people who work and live in those communities need to feel that it's their community and they need the pride, they have pride and ownership in what they achieve there. Members have a sense of belonging and of being needed. Everyone has that need. It's a basic need of life. Members feel safe. We all need to feel safe in the communities that we live. Unity and understanding of common purpose, so that when a community is working on a project, everybody has some kind of an understanding of what it is. And sometimes it takes many conversations to get to the point where people do understand what it is they're actually trying to accomplish and that common purpose, what it is. Needs are met, they're physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual, so there needs to be many aspects within a community that people can feel that their needs are being met. A community needs to be inclusive, it needs to include everyone in there. Timing, when you're working with a community, timing is essential. Sometimes you think that the time is right, and you may find that it is not quite right. So sometimes you have to back up and try again later. So timing is a very important, essential piece of community wellness. And yes, you have to have that positive attitude and approach to how you work with people. So that is community. And the next piece, of course, we start with W for we. And when you're working with people, you don't think in terms of I, you think in terms of we, and you speak in terms of we, not I. Employment, very essential to being community wellness. We all need to have a job, and we all need to have that money that makes our lives go round. Leadership and champion, every community needs to have special people within it that are able to provide that leadership. And sometimes people don't even realize that they have the skills and the ability and knowledge to do that. It's just some encouragement that has to happen along the way that actually makes some of those people into leaders and champions. Listen and learn. That's one of the major pieces that you need to understand, is that listen to what people are saying and learn from what people are saying and what they're doing. The next steps, when you're working with a community, there's always next steps to do, and you assess what it is you're doing, you set out a plan, you act out that plan, evaluate and sustain. You always go back. That's sort of a revolving process. Encourage and cheer on. I always see recreational professional as being the cheerleader, the person who needs to encourage people to tell them that they can do it, they can move on with what they need to do. So you are a cheerleader. Support, and you provide that support in many different ways. You know, it's not just money. Lots of times they don't need your money. What they need is the encouragement and how you can work with them to make it happen. So support comes in many different forms, not just financial. Satisfaction and celebrating together. So when you've done something right, celebrate with your people. Celebrate with them and let them know that you're part of what they've done. And of course, those things that spell out community wellness are not just the only words that I could have used. I mean, vision. Every community, when they're working on something, needs to have that vision, and passion is a big piece of what people bring to the table. Innovative, you know, you have to be creative in how you actually bring about change. Memories. Memories are important. It's good to talk about what things have gone on before, and memories are very important in community wellness. Sustainability. If you're going to be working with a community, you want that community to be able to move along and be there and be well for a long period of time. Willing and enthusiastic volunteers. You can't do anything without those willing and enthusiastic volunteers. Opportunity. There's lots of opportunities, and everybody needs to see where they can fit into those opportunities. Optimism, again, I guess that comes back to the yes. You have to approach things with optimism. And community spirit. To me, the words community spirit and community wellness are almost interchangeable. And of course, there's lots of other words that could be used. And I wanted to share a story with you about a community called Sable River in the municipality district of Shelburne. It's located in district number 7. And it is just inside the line in the municipality of Shelburne from Queens County, between Queens County and Shelburne County. And it's located right along Highway 103. So when you come into Sable River, you have to slow down to the speed limit of 80, or you could be fined for driving too fast. And I chose the community of Sable River. I could have chosen many other communities within the municipality district of Shelburne, but I chose this particular one because in 2010, they were recognized by Lieutenant Governor Mayanne Francis at that particular time, and were awarded the Community Spirit Award. And there's lots of different reasons why that community has community wellness, but this one particular story has to do with going around the river. And when I first heard someone in the community tell me we're going around the river, I couldn't understand quite what they meant. Well, In that community, there's two sides to the community, because it's divided by not just the highway along 103, but there's a river, there's two rivers actually, and they go right down through the community. So there's an east side and there's a west side of the community. And oh my heavens, it's quite a few years ago, but the municipality got involved out there when the CN train abandoned the rails, and we worked with the community and established the Tom Tigney Trail. So it's abandoned rail line, and you can see that from the picture there's that's sort of the trailhead, one piece, and the little kiosk there is waiting for a sign that one of the ladies in the community is going to be painting. She's painted some others and put them up, but that one just hasn't got the sign on it yet. And there's a bridge that links that community from the east side to the west side, and people go across that bridge. They even went across it when the train used to go through. So they've been going across the river there for a long time. This past spring, the municipality supported that community in that we spent $109,000 on a bridge repair project, in that the abutments in both the east and west needed some repair, because probably in another 20 years, if we hadn't have addressed that particular issue, we would have found that the bridge would have probably had to be closed for use, and people would have lost that ability to go across that river. So now there's another trail in that community as well, and it's called the Footbridge Trail. And that's just a bench where people are able to sit and have conversations with each other along the way, because there are people in that community that walk that trail every morning, and they love to meet their neighbor there. They love to go for a walk with their neighbor, and they will sit and have chat on the bench as well. There's also a bridge on that particular trail, and that one's called the Swinging Bridge, and it's been there for over 100 years. Now that bridge is actually owned by Department of Transportation, but the municipality has that one within its footbridge trail as well. And so when people talk about going around the river, they actually start on one side, whether it's the east or the west, and they'll actually go on both trails and go around the river. And in their trips around the river, there's many decisions made, there's many conversations had, and people get to know their neighbor and support their neighbor in learning more about their community. So community spirit in Sable River, well, as they explained it, or as they wrote about it when they applied for when they were nominated for the Community Spirit Award, they said history, family connections, traditions, neighbor helping neighbor, and volunteerism are solid values in Sable River and a big part of resident identity. People are proud to live in Sable River. They're proud to be a part of that community. Now, I gave you lots of good warm and fuzzy things, but I also know that there's many challenges to community wellness. And out-migration is huge, and especially in rural Nova Scotia, and I see it in the municipality district of Shelburne. I see it in Sable River. The young people are not coming back to live in their home communities. The fire departments are finding that they don't have enough people. They don't have enough young people coming to be members of their fire department. And so out-migration is making a huge, huge impact on the wellness of our rural communities. And out-migration then again affects it's a loss of generational experience and family links. What once was so, just the way people lived in community is no longer there, because you've lost the different age groups. There's lack of diversity that happens, and culture and age, and the ages within each of the communities changes. Negativity within a community is something that certainly can stop any particular project that you may be working on in a community. And gossip and rumor, there's nothing that becomes nothing uglier than gossip and rumor. And I've always said that the tongue can be the deadliest of all blunt instruments. You have to be really careful about what you say. And there's lots of other challenges, and I'm sure you people are very aware of those. I came across this a bit ago, and I hung on to it because it really hit a chord with me. And I saw it as some wisdom and some inspiration for recreation professionals that are working with, and not working for, but working with communities. Is go in search of your people. Don't stay in your office. Go into their communities. Go into where they are. Love them, so get to know them. Learn from them. Plan with them. Serve them. Begin with what they have and build on what they know. But the best of leaders, when their task is accomplished, their work is done, the people will remark, we have done it ourselves. And that actually came from a Chinese philosopher over 2,000 years ago. And it still rings true today, and for me, it certainly made some sense. And so, for me, we each have a role to play in community wellness, whether we're the recreational professional or we are the volunteer within our communities, because we all work, play, and live in our communities. So we all have a role to play in making sure that our community is well. Thank you very much.
So our next speaker is Wilma Jensen, and I have a story about Wilma too. You know. So Wilma was my date in 1987 at my sister's wedding. We graduated together, and spent a lot of time with Wilma in my my years at Acadian Recreation. So it's really great to find out that she was one of the speakers in this session, because we haven't seen each other since 1987, 88. So that's pretty cool. And I'm a perm, and she has long hair. Yeah, pretty gross. So Wilma has benefited from a diverse educational and vocational path, including early childhood education diploma from Mount St. Vincent University in 1982, then her Bachelor of Arts in Recreation Management in 1987, and then her Master's in Divinity from Acadia in 2008. She's found her calling in working with the justice system, first as a chaplain for Central Nova Scotia Correctional Facility, and presently as the facilitator at St. Luke's Renewal Centre within the fence of Spring Hill Institution. So when we talk about the community wellness and the community that Wilma's going to share with us tonight, it's going to be really interesting to talk about the connection of recreation there. This one-of-the-kind facility in the federal correction system allows men to renew themselves through a variety of programs led by volunteers from the community. So welcome, Wilma. Looking forward to your presentation.
I'm much more comfortable speaking to a group of inmates, so I'm going to read my stuff a little bit. Anyway, how do we build community wellness? It is a provocative question, especially when it comes to dealing with those among us who act contrary to established mores and violate our laws. Many people think the only cure is to lock up such offenders, removing them from our midst, like cutting out a tumor, to ensure the body's return to health. I am going to speak about those who have been removed from society by being incarcerated. It may be from a slightly different angle than you're expecting, or not. I am, after all, a former prison chaplain, presently facilitator, as Dawn said, for those who want to come into prison and spend time with inmates. I currently work for a non-profit organization called Concilio. It's a Latin word. It means council, usually a religious council, a meeting or a gathering, sort of like what we're doing now. It was started, Concilio, over 40 years ago. It was then called the Christian Council for Reconciliation. It was started by a group of people who had a vision to help inmates grow in their spiritual and emotional health. One of the inspiring founders was from Acadia, Dr. Charlie Taylor, a clinical professor in the theology faculty of the university, Acadia Divinity College. It's the little brick building just up from the sub parking lot. Dr. Taylor received the Order of Canada just the year before he died, partly for his work with inmates. Over the years, there have been a multitude of people who have worked tirelessly in this endeavor. Concilio supports a number of ministries. Spring House, which is a hospitality house for families and friends of inmates who are coming to visit. Spring Hill is a small town, village, I suppose, really, and there aren't a lot of places to stay. So unless you have a car to drive from Amherst, Spring House is a good place. It's fairly inexpensive, and it's just down the road from the facility. St. Luke's Renewal Centre, which I'll talk about more because that's my place of work. There's also an annual Atlantic Prison Volunteer Conference in conjunction with Correctional Services Canada, CSC. and the Kairos Marathons, not the Bulmer or any other kind of race. But it's a 2-day session. It used to be, how long was a marathon? 26.
26.
Right.
26
So when the Kairos Marathon started, they were for 26 hours straight. A couple of inmates tried to escape during one of them, and so now it's cut down into 2 8-day sessions. They're still called marathons. It's composed of volunteers and inmates discussing their pains and joys in an amazingly safe and healing environment, the likes of which I have never experienced anywhere else. It's apt that I'm here in a panel discussion about community wellness representing Concilio, as their mission statement speaks of both healing and community. Oops, that's where the marathons take place. Concilio was founded on the understanding that human brokenness is the root and the end result of crime. This brokenness requires the active participation of the wider faith community if healing and reconciliation are to occur. Our mission is to foster and support community participation in the work of prison ministry, both inside the walls of our prisons and on the street, primarily through volunteer mobilization. And when they say street, because the guys say that too, they're either inside or they're on the street. That doesn't mean that they're living literally on the street, although some of them do. On the street just means outside of the prison. Concilio strongly believes, and a lot of the rest of the pictures are just about St. Luke's, and then St. Luke's mission statement, but the rest are just pictures around St. Luke's and the facility there at Spring Hill. Concilio strongly believes that the most effective ways to help inmates become healthier, and by extension the community, is through contact with community volunteers. In Canada, almost all inmates will return to the community. I think we'd all agree that it's wise and prudent to prepare the prisoner for a healthier way of life. Certainly I don't want them returning to my community more bitter and angry and unhealthy, which is more likely to happen if they're not introduced to a different and healthier way of living while they're incarcerated. Concilio provides a forum where ordinary community people can act as behavior change agents for inmates. Concilio believes that ordinary people, community people, have potent resources for feedback, insight, criticism, forgiveness, care, and affection for inmates. Concilio provides various opportunities for inmates to experience positive interaction with members of society to promote wellness for the entire community. In a statement from the Canadian Bar Association, and that includes both prosecutors as well as defense lawyers, Trinda Ernst, their president, who actually is from this area, stated, "Decades of research and experience have shown what actually reduces crime. The first 3 items speak of child poverty, mental health services, and diverting young offenders from incarceration. The final item, though not the least, is rehabilitating prisoners and helping them to reintegrate into society. That's what helps prevent crime." Concilio strives to provide such experiences for inmates in the Atlantic region. As I mentioned, one of Concilio's ministries is St. Luke's Renewal Center. It's a small bungalow located within the fence. There's not a wall like at Dorchester, but a fence that surrounds Spring Hill Institution. Spring Hill is a medium security federal institution. It's a one-of-a-kind place. No other federal prison has a place like St. Luke's in it. Again, this is one of Charlie's dreams, and because of his cred, as the guys would say, with CSC, it was established, which is an amazing thing, about 12 years ago. So the mission statement for St. Luke's also talks about community and healing. It offers the inmate a balance of retreat times and activities supported by volunteers from the wider community in order to create a physical and spiritual space in which the inmate can experience healing, personal growth, and a new vision for his or her life. When St. Luke started, there were still some women or female inmates at Spring Hill. No longer is the case. The board believes that healing and reconciliation require vulnerability, healthy ownership of emotion, and an atmosphere of trust. At St. Luke's, I try to ensure that the men experience all of that. You may ask how all this relates to community wellness. Well, no pun intended. Surgery is often necessary to remove a tumor, but it's only part of the healing process. There are many other interventions required to bring the body to a healthy state again to ensure that cancer doesn't return. All parts of the body must be healthy for it to function at its optimum. Once we've removed those who violate our laws, we must develop interventions that restore health to the entire body. In other words, develop a healthy community. Rehabilitating inmates is one such intervention. So on a pragmatic level, since almost all inmates in Canada, as I said, return to the community, not always the one that they came from, but to someone's community, it's in our own best interests to help them return as healthy individuals, as opposed to ones committed to continuing the life of crime and addiction. So this is the back part of St. Luke's. And as you look at those windows, if you're standing and looking at those windows, I have another shot that shows the hills behind the institution, and that's what the guys see when they're either sitting on the tables there or looking out the windows. Secondly, contributing to the health of inmates helps to define who we are as a society or a community. Is our civil society body healthy, or are we missing body parts? I believe, as do many others, that how we treat those who are marginalized, inmates being one such group, reveals the type of society we truly are. The moral imperative begs the question, do we, as a community, want to be healthy morally, as well as physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and socially? Let me illustrate this with this point with a recent experience that demonstrates the growth of the moral health of the lifers group at Spring Hill Institution. Lifers are those inmates who have been convicted of murder and are serving a life sentence. Doesn't necessarily mean that they'll stay in prison for the rest of their lives, which is the case in some of the states, but they are responsible to a parole officer for the rest of their lives. So the lifers group at Spring Hill this past Monday on Victoria Day planned and operated an event within the fence of the institution. They had barbecue, hot dogs and hamburgers, an ice cream sale, and a walkathon, all to raise money for the Kids Helpline. It was a beautiful day, if you can remember Monday. And the rest of the inmate population participated enthusiastically, especially the ice cream lineup. So what they do is they had a sheet of paper and they could say how much they wanted to donate, and it would come out of their current account if they had money. There were 3 Kids Helpline workers who came in to sort of help them with the event. And what was really kind of cool was that they were so impressed with the men. Like, they couldn't get over how, like, none of the other events that they had to raise money for the Kids Helpline had ever taken place inside of a prison before. And they were just blown away with how enthusiastic the men were, how well organized they were. It was a connection that the men made with the wider community because of their own childhoods and because of their own children. line disappeared to, but one of the Kids Helpline workers was saying, she sort of spoke to the whole group and said they service kids from 4 years to 20 years old. The youngest child that they had a phone call from was from a 4-year-old who wanted to know how to commit suicide. The guys really resonated with that. Either thinking, yeah, I can remember being 4 and wanting to commit suicide, or I hope my kid's not thinking that. So they really did make this connection with the wider community. While I, as a facilitator at St. Luke's, didn't have anything in specific to do with the event, many of the lifers during the day, because I attended, repeatedly told me that the presence of St. Luke's within the facility and within their lives had a direct impact on the planning of the event. Thirdly, this brings me to the reason why I do what I do and how I believe it contributes to the wellness of our communities. As a Christian minister, although Brenda introduced me earlier as Reverend Jansen, I never go by that. What I do is rooted in my faith in God. So I follow to the best of my limited ability God's call to love the least of these. Jesus had an overwhelming love for those folks who were marginalized, who were cut out of society, out of the community. And that's all the preaching that I'm going to do. But it does relate to healthy communities. Prisons are crowded and very noisy, not an environment which encourages quiet reflection of life and its meaning. By examining inner thoughts and feelings which may have been buried for years, men can begin the process of healing wounded areas and of reconciling with themselves, with others, with God. This in turn brings hope and lifelong changes in both attitude and behavior. Thank you for getting those pictures. This is the inside of St. Luke's. It provides a place of quiet, a space of safety in which the men can begin this process. For many, it's a strange and foreign process, as many come from extremely unhealthy places, either families or communities, or both. For some, St. Luke's is the first healthy relationship or environment that they've experienced. One young Aboriginal man, upon entering the house for the first time, said, "Wow, this is just like somebody's home." When asked if St. Luke's Renewal Centre has an impact on the health of their community, the prison, which is truly a community, several men responded immediately and adamantly in the affirmative. When asked what wellness meant to them in their context, this is how they responded. Wellness meant to be recharged, to be relieved from some stress, to become grounded to what was truly important in life, and to gain perspective. Coming to the Renewal Centre helped them in those areas of life, and furthermore, it helped them to stay focused when they returned to the yard, to the main prison, so they could better deal with the stresses and issues that happen all too often in prison life. How does St. Luke's provide all of this? And what is it about this small house and its activities that contribute to the health of the Spring Hill Institution community? It's a retreat from the prison life, or as they would say, from the yard. It's a soothing place. It's quiet. A lot of the ranges that the guys live on are very noisy, lots of music, and they kind of echo. They're not quiet. They can leave all the BS back in the units when they come to St. Luke's. There are no judgments or expectations at St. Luke's. Even if there's a program going on and different men have signed up and they are there with somebody that they wouldn't normally associate with in the yard, at St. Luke's, they get along. It's the respect that the place has of its own. There's personal or internal freedom. They can drop the facade that is necessary for survival in the yard. And there's a totally different atmosphere at St. Luke's. There's a sense of home. Those are all the words that the guys told me when they were talking about St. Luke's. The men in the institution respect this place, much as they do a chapel. There can be fights on the way down to chapel. There can be fights on the way back from chapel. There are never fights in chapel in a prison. And that is true of almost all, I don't know internationally, but or in the other parts of the world, but certainly North America. The number of conflicts that actually take place in a chapel, you could probably count on two hands. Like, it just doesn't happen. St. Luke's has that kind of atmosphere and that kind of respect. The importance of volunteers from the community is vital to the success of St. Luke's. At its inception, it was decided that community volunteers would be the backbone of the center, and that stands to this day. My title is facilitator. What I do is recruit and security train community volunteers to deliver programs to the men at the institution. And the programs are diverse: yoga and meditation, gardening, including watching the birds at feeders, hummingbirds, there are lots of them, drumming, working with dreams, spiritual steps to freedom, self-expression through painting, writing programs, poetry, personality types and their contribution to self-knowledge. The activities address many areas in which the men can learn and grow and discover a new way of being in the world. These recreational activities actually create and recreate health for the inmates. While each program is valid in itself, an essential component of each of them is the interaction with the community volunteer who offers the program. Their willingness to be present in the prison to offer something to the men is so important. The men are deeply appreciative of outside people coming in to visit them and spend time with them. These volunteers give them not only the programs, but more fundamentally, give them dignity. I have never seen volunteers come into the prison and at the end of whatever session it is, the men are always thankful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you so much for taking the time to come in and see us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I've never not heard that. It may be the first time that someone has acknowledged them, the inmate, as a human being and treated them as such. The normative presence of community members coming to interact with inmates is integral to their growth and healing. Many of the men who are incarcerated come from extremely unhealthy homes and families. Sometimes it's their mother or father who has stuck the first needle into their arm for drugs, or who have abused them in other horrific ways, and I could tell you lots of stories. The women from the Kids Helpline spoke, that's where this line went to, talked about the 4-year-old who wanted to commit suicide, and the guys just, they just so resonated with that. And it's the community volunteers who come in that demonstrate what healthy relationships can be like, even as they engage in what some might consider are just recreational activities. It's the relationships as much as the activities themselves that are fundamental to the men's healing and also to their returning and contributing to our communities in a healthy manner. Community wellness. Community wellness is built by a wide variety of groups and individual endeavors. We've heard of one, and then mine so far, and are going to hear more. I hope you'll consider those who are marginalized and cut out of the body when thinking about how to strengthen and maintain health in our communities. That's what the guys see when they look out those big windows. Although the fence is there and the security lighting is still not looking at the units. Thank you.
For the last 20 years hanging around with Brenda, every time I'd be with Brenda, it'd be about, Una's doing this and Una's doing that. And so I feel like I know.
I can tell some more stories.
Brenda's like to talk about firing me. She very much is a champion of Una. Una is from Newfoundland, as you may have read from the bio. Yeah. She graduated in 1993 from recreation program here at Acadia. Spent a number of years working with the Y in Halifax, Dartmouth area in a variety of capacities before returning back to Acadia as the community program coordinator. And Una has a number of positions and is currently the manager of student supports. She completed her master's in 2006, and she's over the years sat on several local, national, and international boards revolving around wellness, and is a part-time lecturer at the School of Recreation Management and Kinesiology at Acadia. When we had our connection with the panel members on call, one of the things that Una's going to bring this evening is that community of Acadia and connecting with the water community, and I think the impact that we can have on social issues in our community. So welcome, Una, and thanks.
Thank you. So I think we're doing it in order of when we graduated, but I just want to point out that I graduated in 06, Gabby graduated in 03. So I ultimately should be going last. And just another point of interest that we were talking about how far people have come for the conference. Muggs here has come from overseas, all the way from Newfoundland to be here today. And I'll see also that some things never change. Like you're all sitting in the back.
Oh, I was going to suggest that they were all Baptists sitting in the back.
So if you haven't already figured out, obviously two of the main words of the day seem to be community and wellness. Does anybody remember the days of Pee Wee Herman? I feel like every time we say the word community or wellness, we all should be going, ah! So don't do it though, because I'm going to say community probably many, many times during the session. So what I want to talk to you about is my experience with the idea that quite often we will work in areas or communities that are in fact communities within another community. So most of you, if not all of you, I don't think we have any other outsiders. Are the Dow folks gone? No. So all of you know what we're talking about when we talk about a community within a small community. So I'm going to talk about Acadia within Wolfville. Hopefully when I share some things with you, A, it makes sense, but B, you're able to draw the connections in your own situation. So obviously I'm going to be referring in a lot of respects to university and university life and all that kind of stuff, but the concepts themselves, of course, can be applied no matter what community you're working with. So I work in student services at Acadia, and although it's not directly a recreation field, it is so wonderful to be here for this conference and for the next few days with all of us who have started from the same place and gone off to do our various jobs and locations in different places and areas and countries and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of like student services really is the field of recreation. And many of us have actually graduated from this program and are busy infiltrating into student services at university campuses across the country and in fact across North America. So the first point I want to talk about, a community is very much at least the sum of all its parts. It has the potential, however, to be so much more than the sum of all its parts. And the reason I want to start with this idea or this concept is because we can sit here, and it was interesting even in the first session this afternoon, how we talked about our pursuit of leisure and our pursuit of recreation and what we're doing and how it's difficult to do it because of this, but it's easy to do it because of this, all of those types of ideas. And all the while I'm sitting there and wanting to turn to the entire room and say, how many of you have put leisure at the top of your priority list? Because we talk about how easy it is for it to be the first thing to drop off the list, right? Are we practicing what we preach, is my question to you. And is it easy to practice what we preach? No, it's not. But when we start thinking about communities and we start thinking about the role that we're playing in our communities, I think it's important for us to start with ourselves as individuals and what we're doing around our wellness. Even having a conversation about recreation and leisure and wellness and how they all interchange. I mean, that could be a whole other session all on its own. But thinking about what we do for our own individual wellness. And there is a reason why I'm standing here today in my very snazzy Irish rugby shirt, as as Ryan pointed out when I walked in. And I've also gotten a compliment from the audience, a quiet compliment from the audience, but there's a reason. And you'll notice that it has, where's our chemistry major in the room? So the chemistry major in the room will be able to tell you what the O2 stands for. It stands for? Oxygen. Right, absolutely, it stands for oxygen. Here's my mantra, and I'll tell it to you quickly because it is related, I promise it is. So I was at home visiting my mom, who was in hospital. She was hospitalized for cancer and has since left us. And when I went home, I hadn't been home to Newfoundland in a while. Mom was in hospital, but I went to the house, unpacked my stuff, got changed, to go to the hospital. And I stopped for a second and I thought, I've just flown home overseas. We all know it's a long flight to Newfoundland. And I was, itchy. I had to go for a run. I'm a runner. I enjoy running. So rather than going directly back to the hospital, I went out for a long run. And at that time, it still is, 10K is about a long run for me. So it took me a while. And I decided to go around the community that I grew up in, to have a little sort of look around while at the same time going for my run. And halfway through my run, I thought to myself, Una, what are you doing? You came home to visit your mother, and she's sitting there in hospital. What are you doing out for a run right now? And I felt a pang of guilt for a minute or so. But then I got thinking about the flight home. And I got thinking about how when you step on a plane and the flight attendants start talking about if you experience an air pressure change during this flight, oxygen masks will drop from the ceiling. And what do they tell you to do with that oxygen mask? They tell you to put it on yourself first. Now, how many of you here have people in your lives that you care about? It's not a trick question. Okay. How many of you have people in your lives that you directly care for right now, whether it be an aging parent or children or any, okay, perfect. How counterintuitive is it for you to think about putting your mask on before you put it on, say, your 4-year-old child you're traveling with? Right? You're going to automatically think about putting that mask on your child first. Well, guess what? If you do that, you have rendered yourself useless to anyone else that you happen to be traveling with and yourself. Right? You're meant to put your oxygen mask on first. And as I'm running along, I'm thinking to myself, Una, that's what you're doing right now. You're putting your oxygen mask on first before you go to the hospital to see your mother. Right? So I thought, oh, geez, I'm going to make a lot of money is what I started thinking, because I was like, that's a really good idea, that's a really good concept, and I was like, Oprah's going to have me on her show. Okay, so I got home, the first thing I did was Google it. Go figure, I wasn't the first one to think about it. And as Brenda told me many times during my master's, there's no such thing as an original thought. Damn it, I thought I'd find a thought one, but I didn't. So I've since adopted this whole idea of the oxygen mask theory. Try to sum it up very quickly. One of the things I did for myself in terms of being able to sort through my individual wellness and being able to step into a vocation and into a role in my work environment to be able to help improve wellness of the broader community, but the sums of that community, was being able to sort through things that were going on in my personal life. And one of the things I did was travel to Ireland because I decided that's what I needed to do for my wellness, not my physical wellness this time, because I wasn't running around Ireland, but I was looking at the other areas of my wellness that often get left off the radar. And again, even earlier when we were talking about recreation and leisure, it's amazing how quickly we talk about the physical stuff that we're doing. The running, or the biking, or the power walking, or the whatever, get up and move, and all that kind of stuff. Not discounting it at all, but there's so much more to it. So I traveled to Ireland to take care of my other areas of wellness, and thought to myself, this is my oxygen mask, I'm putting it on. And what was really funny is when I got there, there's a phone company that has this as its logo, and they were sponsoring the next rugby tournament that was going on. And so all these were everywhere, but plus, every time there was a phone company fill up something, I don't even understand what it was, O2 was everywhere. Everywhere I went, I saw O2, chuckling to myself, because it was reaffirming for me that I was doing the right thing. So, taking that piece of information, or taking that concept of how do we go out and improve our community's wellness if we're not, first and foremost, taking care of ourselves, right? So think about that, and then think about when you're dealing with the community. So first of all, we've got the individual. So if we can get out there and we can start to produce programs or activities or promotions or whatever around individual wellness and start to piece together that idea of a community that eventually, hopefully, as I say, will become greater than the sum of its parts. Communities within a community. So Acadia within Wolfville, Nova Scotia. On a macro level, there are similar overarching objectives, right? So we've got a small university. We're known for our great class sizes and the ratio and all that kind of stuff. You can't get lost on campus, you know, because people recognize you, and if they see you and you look like you're having a bad day, then, you know, people can kind of go, did you see so-and-so? And we can check in behind and make sure they're okay, all that kind of stuff. So that small university feel fits very nicely within our small town feel, because we all know within Wolfville, you can't walk 10 feet and not see somebody you know, and so on and so forth. So those overarching objectives often will be very similar. However, within that, at a micro level, each entity may have objectives that vary slightly from one another. So Acadia University existing as a community within the town of Wolfville, sometimes we have opportunities or instances where our objectives may not necessarily mesh. And I will say to you that I firmly believe that every time we talk about sort of what's going on at the university and within the community, it's wellness related. But you'd have a hard time convincing me that pretty much anything that we do in the run of the day is not wellness related. So, being the type of person who, I wanted to cover the 5 areas of wellness as well. I'm sure everybody in this room knows this. But just again, sort of back to the story that I was telling, when we talk about wellness and we talk about community wellness, it's not just about the physical. It's not just about the access to healthcare that we have or don't have in the community. It's not just the access to physical or facilities that offer physical wellness opportunities and that type of thing. It's very much about the emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and social as well, which, as we all know, the other 4 are far more intangible, harder to address, harder to describe, harder to demonstrate, and harder to promote. So we've got a bit of a challenge ahead of us, certainly. And being, you know, sort of, I had to laugh, right? You know, and it was like, where do you start? Well, let's see, I know, acronyms. Anybody who's taken my course, Physically Active Living, it's called PAL. I mean, it's a flippin' acronym to start with, whatever. I mean, it just works, right? You try to, anyway. So when I think about working at Acadia University and sort of really driving the boat behind wellness in our community, particularly for our students, but it is also for faculty and staff and everybody who exists in our community. But my job specifically is around student wellness and existing within the town of Wolfville as well. These are the words that came to my mind when I started thinking about it. And I was so happy to see that communication was at the top of yours, because I really believe in terms of communities, but also in terms of wellness, communication is the biggest drum that I will beat, right? It's about talking to people. It's about talking to doctors when something goes wrong. It's about connecting with people to improve your areas of wellness, the other areas of wellness. It's all about communicating. And being able to have a community like a university existing within a town like Wolfville, the communication between the 2 entities, if you will, because I don't ever want them to be 2 entities, but for the lack of a better explanation, the communication back and forth between the 2 is essential. We can't, as a university, decide to go and do something and not inform the town of Wolfville, and vice versa, right? Because it's kind of like, it's like a tide changing, right? The tide comes in, the tide goes out, and you've got these swells going on, and if you've got no communication going back and forth, you're getting these swells, right? That it worked in my mind. I don't know if that made sense to you, but mine it did. Okay, wonderful. The second one, objectives. When we talk about community wellness and when we talk about wellness as a concept, regardless of which area of wellness we're talking about, ultimately it comes down to, okay, if we're going to make a decision, or if we're going to put a program in place, or if we're going to develop a service, what is the objective of the service? And does the objective of the service that we're providing within our university community fit within the broader community of Wolfville? And I'll tell you, any time that there seems to be that swells from tides, it's because we've lost sight of the objectives. So it's peel it back and say, why are we doing this? What is the objective that we are trying to accomplish here? And that makes it so much more clear for the players and stakeholders to be able to move forward. Mutual respect. We can't exist as a university in this town without a mutual respect for the town of Wolfville, and for the town of Wolfville having a mutual respect for what we're doing as well. And when I speak, even as I speak, it sounds like it's two entities, right? It is, but we have come such a long way in the last 20 years, even the last 5 to 10 more so, around what we're doing together, so that we're doing it for the good of everybody involved. And I could get into all kinds of great little examples for you, I don't know, around alcohol consumption, for example, in a university town. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the bars wanting to close later and how that affects the student population, and all kinds of great stuff. Always wellness related as well. Meaningful discussions. Opening that door to let's discuss it before we make decisions. So the mutual respects and the communication, but the meaningful discussions, and being able to speak candidly about how a decision is going to affect one group versus the other group, and can we get to a point where the decision we're making affects both in a positive manner. Great scenario if you can get it, but can be a challenge to get it, of course. And understanding, an understanding of what it is, what the objective is that we're particularly trying to drive at in this particular example. And often when you, as you know, when you have two groups coming from different perspectives, so again, I'm just going to keep coming back to the alcohol issue. I don't know why, because let's think about how often we talk about that one. But having that understanding that you've got a population of students, whatever percentage of them enjoy consuming alcohol. We exist in a very small town, so they always work, students are typically either on the campus, which is in the town, or in the town, right? And the town folk, the people who live here full time, and the people who have units that they rent to students, right? Having an understanding of what's important to them versus what's important to the student population, and trying to find that happy medium between the two. Lots of interesting discussions around those particular topics. Negotiation. Lots of negotiation. And I gotta be honest with you, I had a couple of other N words that I was gonna put in there, and I thought, like networking, you know, that one was like, oh yeah, networking, yeah, we gotta get out there, we gotta network, blah, 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 whatever. Let's talk about honestly, you get to a point oftentimes when you're pursuing an area that has to do with a service around wellness, that you negotiate. Well, let's look at, and right now we're negotiating about this idea of the bars in town wanting to be open later, right? And then, as I say, how that trickles down into the community. So it's not just bars want to stay open later because they're going to get more revenue, we'll go figure. But then we're looking at the people who live in the community, and now it's 3 a.m. instead of 2 a.m. when everybody's filtering back from the bars to campus. And then it's when they get back to campus, it's all the staff and services that we have on campus that are now up later, awake later, and whatever, dealing with, you know, this simple hour later that the bars want to stay open, right? So we're getting into discussions where we're talking about, well, what about if it's on certain holidays and not certain days, and that type of thing. Individuals. So obviously, whenever we have a discussion, communication, mutual discussion, when we're negotiating, we have individuals who are coming to the board, and it's individuals from our community, campus community, and then there's individuals from the town of Wolfville as well. And again, I come back to the idea of it being the sum of all those parts. And when you come to that table as a well individual, it really does translate into that whole concept and that whole discussion around what we can do as the broader community to be a healthy community. Teamwork, I mean, that goes without saying. I actually purposely thought about pulling out that T and changing it up, but you know what? It is about teamwork, and it is about being able to come to the board with your own perspectives, but also to be able to work with others. And then, of course, the one thing that we deal with in our community, in our community on the university campus, is the yearly transition, right? So every year, we've got at least 1,000 different players in the equation, right? Because you've got your fourth years who are graduating, you've got your new ones coming in. So just that whole idea of settling out and status quo, and yeah, we don't get it. We don't get it in a university community, and we don't get it in a small town like Wolfville, because, as you all know, the population of Wolfville doubles when the university starts up in September, right? So that yearly transition causes a bit of a challenge, but it also infuses us with new ideas, new energy, and sometimes new but very interesting challenges to deal with around wellness in the community. So that's it for me.
Our last speaker, and there was an event that was hosted for me a few years ago where Gabby and another favorite person of mine got up and they used cards to spell my name. So in introducing her, G stands for great, A stands for awesome, B stands for beautiful, and BY stands for best is yet to come. So I'd like to introduce Gabby Riley Gallagher. Yeah, just got married a few years ago. Gabby, in her bio, started her recreation degree in 1998. And at Dalhousie, we all make mistakes. The next year, she sought different classroom volunteering in different communities across Canada with Team Evic, and in 2000, the stars aligned, and Gabby found herself continuing her rec degree at Acadia, where she made many, many friends and had an amazing experience. She then moved to Halifax to work for the municipality in civic events. I don't see where you worked for me at Recreation Nova Scotia.
It was after that.
Oh, okay. Not in here. And in 2005, Gabby returned to Nova Scotia, where she has, after some traveling in East Africa and New Zealand, where she's been working ever since in the field of active living health promotion. And she enjoys spending her time running with her husband and running after her little daughter, Romy. And Gabby is doing some amazing work in Halifax Regional Municipality around the link of community wellness and the built environment. So as our last speaker, welcome Gabby Gallagher.
It feels weird you calling me Gabby Gallagher, and so it's Gabby Riley. Thanks for having me here tonight. I would not like to thank Brenda, who reeled me into this. And the question attached to this session, I'm still reading it and going, I feel like I'm in like the second hour of one of Brenda's exams. And I've been writing for 2 hours and I'm not quite sure I understand the question totally. But I was invited here nonetheless to share my perspective around community wellness. I was very glad that I'm last in the row because some of the speakers have really touched on a lot of the heart and the essence of community wellness. And in the last quite a few years, I've been working in the Halifax Regional Municipality, so I have this municipal approach to it. It doesn't mean I don't have that community development and heart attached to my work. It's a different ball game working within the municipality and seeing how the municipality can impact community wellness. HRM, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is a very large municipality. Most people think of HRM, and I often hear from colleagues in the field, you're so urban, it's all urban, and yeah, there's the biggest urban core in HRM, but it also takes over 2 hours to drive from one end to the other, and let me tell you, that's not all HRM urban core. In getting this presentation together, I had two titles, so I'm going to share both of them with you. The first is Born to Move, because I really think that's the essence of where my heart for my work comes around community wellness. It's around physical activity. And that's my daughter, Romy. New mom, how can you not put a photo of your child? The second working title is A Piece of the Pie, and this is where I really want to acknowledge that physical activity, that's where I work, that's where my drive comes from. But physical activity is a piece of the pie of community wellness, and I'm not standing here trying to sell us all on that's the only piece of it. So a bit of an overview. I'm going to talk about community wellness through active living, what we know around active living and physical activity, some fast facts, the municipal roles in contributing to community wellness, And physical activity is an area of community wellness, and it's also a tool for it. And just to touch on that now, it kind of goes with it's a piece of the pie. In my work, the end result of what I want to see is a more active community for our residents. So it's the end result, but it can also be, physical activity can be used as the tool for community wellness. So people may, just a quick example from HRM, in the YMCA has some great immigrant services programs, and a lot of the programs are focused around physical activity. So yes, people are signing up for aerobics or Nordic walking. So it's the tool, but the end result is community wellness, because it's for these new immigrants. It's a connection piece. It's learning English. It's better connecting to different services in their community. So I just wanted to acknowledge that piece of physical activity being the tool as well. This is the definition that I'm working from Healthy Community. Healthy Community is continually creating and improving opportunities in the built, natural, and social environments, and expanding community resources to enable all its citizens to be physically active in day-to-day life. Physical activity cheat sheet. Just so we're all on the same page here, for lack of better notes up there for you. Health Canada, if you're under the age of 18, recommends 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity, not a lot. If you're an adult, it was bumped down to 150 minutes per week. I won't comment on that. I could spend the next hour on that. But types of activity, people often know, we all know to eat from the different food groups. We often forget to have physical activity from the different physical activity groups. These are some of my mantras whenever, it doesn't matter whether I'm speaking to school-age children or adults, these are always the points that we want to drive home. And when I talk about active living, I'm talking about less so focus on physical activity, more so focus on an active lifestyle. And you'll see with the rest of my presentation, that's where I'm going to focus on. What do we know? We've got lots of great research and information on physical activity levels in Canada. It's not new news to anyone that we're failing, we're flunking, we're doing miserably as far as physical activity levels across the nation. It doesn't matter where you are, urban, rural, what have you. We have we're lucky enough to have some really great research. Just a tip of the hat to the Active Healthy Kids research that we have right here in Nova Scotia. What this tells us is we're not doing enough. Something's wrong here. And this is just a little, a new addition to the physical activity guidelines. They now have guidelines for people, for sedentary guidelines. So the people who are actually meeting that limited 60 minutes of physical activity daily, they're still accumulating 23 hours of their day of not moving. So that's another area in the field that we need to be cautious of. We all know, these are great laid out. It's no news to all of us, the benefits that we reap from physical activity. These benefits have been around for decades. We all are probably very well versed in them. But still, something's happening. We're not moving enough. We know we should be active, and we're not. Couple more photos. Shout out to my daughter Romy. This is a little more along the lines of the Born to Move part of my presentation. 30 years ago, families owned one car. Computers were not in every household. You played rock, paper, scissors to see who had to get up to change the channel. When you went bowling, it was in a bowling alley, not with your Wii controller on the couch. Kids played outside in their neighborhoods until the street lights went on. In the field of active living, we realized we need to reach outside of the recreation and sport field. We know we need to continue working with people who create our environments and communities and connect better with the people within them. I was at a session last week, and actually Rick was there as well, and a colleague said a really neat thing that's kind of rung in my head a couple times since, and it's when we look back to when we were young, we often have this like great nostalgic feeling of playing in the backyard and all those things, and we know, especially from some of our conversations today, that the times have changed, so we can't try and recreate necessarily what we had. We have to look at what's going on in our systems now, our communities, technology and trends, and address them that way, and that kind of, that's stuck with me since. TikTok, TikTok. This is another one-liner that I often say in presentations. No one starts their day planning to be really inactive, and from a municipal role, this starts to feed into why we have such an important role to play. In a recent survey that was done by Capital Health, 80% of people surveyed indicated they intended to be more active. And also in an HRM, a lot of my references are HRM, but in an HRM citizen survey, top 3 ranked services were recreation and trails. So people have this value of it, but when we look at the numbers of who's actually using them, it's pretty dismal, so there's something missing there. Responsibility. It's not a question of if municipalities impact physical activity levels and active living within our communities. It's a question of how we impact physical activity. A municipality, not to put all the pressure on municipalities, but we do physically create the environments for our residents. I've had a lot of great opportunities in the last year. HRM has looked at their regional plan review. It's a master plan, 25-year plan of literally the policies and planning practices of how we build our communities in HRM. And it was a really great opportunity for me to jump in. My role within HRM is help develop, and we're implementing a physical activity strategy for the region, and so it's a very comprehensive approach, and it's very easy to say, oh, we'll just get those planners to, make better bike lanes and have, better connectivity, but it's a whole other ballpark to try and jump into their world and see how and why they create the environments that we live in. This is a really great area to talk about preventative measures around community wellness and connectivity. And often one of the hardest things that I've experienced coming into this new world of planning and what have you is I'm very comfortable in my recreation and community development area under HRM, but jumping into this new area, I feel at times that I have to come to the table and have some real meat to give people, because when you look at a municipality's agenda, health and community wellness isn't on the checklist. That's typically under the provincial mandate. When you look at the budget for a municipality, health isn't part of that checklist. Recreation plays a big role, and recreation does a really good job at what they do. But health isn't one of the decision makers, or it's not an indicator. One thing that's really timely with this regional plan review is also looking at the trends of what's going on. Nova Scotia just got the shipbuilding contract, which brings a lot of change to especially the region of HRM. And if we don't jump on that and are attentive to some of these things, our built environment will be responding to it regardless, and it can either respond in a way that, to try and find a specific example for you, we could either build, thousands of more parking spaces in the core of HRM to handle all these new employees, or we could find a better way to promote active transportation or partial active transportation to get these people there. I'm going to keep going. I can ramble about that for a long time. When going into this new world of the regional plan, I had to try and think, how do I speak in the terms that planners and community design, it makes sense to them, and to show them how much they can impact physical activity levels and community wellness. And I've used this physical activity domains model to showcase it that a municipality can really impact physical activity levels in these different areas. Lost my notes here. These are the environments that we can impact. For school and work, making sure that schools are connected within our communities and have healthy, productive workplaces. There's flexibility within the workplace and incentives to be active. For home and communities, that they're walkable, they're safe, communities where people feel engaged and have a sense of belonging. There's mixed use buildings and services as well as affordable housing, so that people do have a choice in living in a community that's more walkable. For leisure and play, the biggest piece is around access, that looking at some of the social determinants of health, there are some big pieces of that a municipality can be part of, whether it's cost, equipment access, grants, etc. We also, in Nova Scotia, we have so much in the realm of natural and built environment. We need to make sure that residents are aware and have access to these leisure opportunities. And the last one is transportation, being an active opportunity, efficient and easy. A little quote I have here, research has shown that the risk of obesity goes up 6% for every hour spent in a car each day, while the risk of obesity goes down by almost 5% for every kilometer walked each day. And that's just looking at obesity. If we look back at some of the other determinants of wellness and benefits, by walking you see your community, you value it, you have social connections. I'm going to keep going. Community design and health. So I'm going to flip a little bit further into the community design portal and read you this quote. One of the unexpected consequences of this movement, and I'll refer to that in a moment, of people away from compact urban cores was a decrease in the ability to lead active lifestyles, presenting public health with a new challenge of chronic disease prevention. And this is all along the lines of rekindling a relationship between planning and health. And it relates back to around the Industrial Revolution time, when we started seeing that public health separated the places where people worked and people lived, because it was seen as negative health impacts. And so we went to this model of public health being involved in saying it's unhealthy to live there because of the population. We couldn't deal with air pollution, sanitation, etc. And after a while, they thought they solved the problem, and public health no longer became part of that planning process. And decades and decades later, we've really realized that we're missing the boat if public health isn't part of the planning process, and I'll touch on that in a bit. I've also highlighted here an important means of improving physical activity rates in Canada is through active, healthy community design. We have several best practices and great tools that do showcase how the built environment can positively impact health. I can get so off topic. To keep us going along here, so back to supporting community wellness and guiding principles. These are actually the guiding principles from Stepping Up, the physical activity strategy for the Halifax region that I'm very familiar of. And it just touches on some of the pieces around building off existing assets, diversity, evidence-informed partnerships. It's very, I guess it's a high level approach that's away from some of the other supportive community wellness principles that were described earlier. And I wanted to kind of come with an example that merges kind of some of these things that were touched on earlier around community wellness, and also the importance of the municipal role in the built environment. And so I made a little recipe from the Community Wellness Cookbook. My example is the Amera Skating Oval. Now I just wanted to ask, how many people are aware of the oval, as some people call it in Halifax? Okay, is anyone not aware of it? Canada Games Oval. I'll send you some photos later. So, looking at an ingredient list for this recipe, the oval was seen as a huge success by a lot of people, regardless of whether you were part of it or not. We had some great discussions around it in the last week with some of my work colleagues. Over 130,000 people skated on the oval in the short season that it had, which is an incredible number of people at one venue. Some of the ingredient lists that I've chosen to highlight here is, it was an interdepartmental initiative within HRM. It wasn't just recreation involved, it was grounds, it was maintenance, it was infrastructure, asset management. The list goes on. It was a very interdepartmental initiative, so a lot of people were really tied and brought in on it, which helped bring elements of success. Partnerships. The partnerships extended well beyond HRM's walls. Active Halifax being one of them. All the partners brought a little something different to the table, which I think is why it was seen as such a success. It was innovative and unique. There's no other venue like this I'd like to say Atlantic Canada. I'll touch on maybe the unique part later. All access. There was no cost, it was on a bus route, there was on-site infrastructure, so if you showed up there were washrooms, there were benches, warming huts, whatever. There were grants to schools and different communities so that they had the ability to come and get there. Equipment was provided, that was another huge thing, and quality equipment at that. It was a great venue, like all great venues, music, food, it was a great atmosphere. It was controversial, and one thing about this that I add on the ingredient list was not everyone liked the oval, not everyone agreed with it, but it was something worth talking about, which says something. The media got a hold of it. There was a lot of community engagement involved for feedback and planning and continual feedback for the oval. As I said, media was involved. It was from our physical activity world, one theme or best practice area. It was outdoor, no registration required, and it's a lifelong activity. So even though people may only had an opportunity to skate on the oval once or a couple times, we live in Nova Scotia. You're close to a lake or somewhere that you can skate most often than not. And the last key ingredient was that everyone was welcome. It was intergenerational. It didn't matter if you were walking by there on your way home from work. My daughter Romy, who couldn't even skate, absolutely freaked out every time she saw the oval. People date is what she would call it. So in conclusion, I just wanted to showcase where community design works well. What do we know? Take two, municipalities play a large role in creating environments that support and inspire the residents to be active. We need to showcase the benefits of this investment and make municipalities realize that we can't remain status quo. We simply can't afford to. We need to incorporate a health principle into municipal policies for leadership and accountability interdepartmentally, and especially when it comes to creating environments. I hope I've given you something to think about today that you may not have already thought of, and if you want any more stats or information,